All right, so it's great to see everybody. Oh, you can't see me again. Now you can see me, right? Okay.
Yes.
Hopefully you can see me. Okay, good. All right, shalom, shalom, everybody. Great to see you. Before we get started, did you hear about the guy who was taken to the hospital for claiming he wasn't visible? Well, they brought him to the ICU. Oh, okay. All right. So we're ready to, sorry about that. So we're ready to start with our class. And
that was pretty good. That was pretty good, Rabbi.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. The bar is very low, so it's okay. Today we're going to have a special class, and it's special because it's really the key to everything we've been talking about. The key to everything we've been talking about, and that is we've been speaking about Chabad, Chokhmah, Bina, Dat, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. We mostly spoke about wisdom and understanding last week. And now we are ready to talk about knowledge. And knowledge is the key to everything. So let us delve into this. If you have the Practical Tanya, which we're not going to look inside yet, but it will be on page 62. So here is a example. You have a child prodigy. Sorry, let me get the door. Joke, I'm sorry. I know. You must be really sad you missed the joke. Yeah, it was a good one. Anyway, so there's a child prodigy. This kid is, proving to be the next Einstein, and just completely brilliant. Okay, he's your 7-year-old son. Would you let him cross the street by himself? Would you let him cross a busy street by himself? He's 7 years old. He's more brilliant than most 20-year-olds you know. Would you let him cross the street by himself? Yeah, we're recording. Yeah, you can answer.
Well, brilliance does not equate to common sense either. So you got to be careful with that.
Okay, good. Brilliance doesn't equate to common sense. Okay, good. Let's give another example. You have $1,000 in cash. Are you going to entrust it with your brilliant child or the grandfather who may not be so brilliant, but grandfather lives a lot of years and whatnot? You're going to entrust it with the grandfather, and that is because understanding is not everything, as you said. You might call it the word common sense. We're going to add in another word here. It's called in Hebrew bar das. It's a word in Hebrew called bar das, someone who has knowledge. Or we can use the word maturity. Maturity, there's really something to maturity. Brilliance does not equate maturity. We hope that when people get older, they have maturity. But we definitely understand the concept and idea that brilliance and maturity are two separate things. So someone can have the wisdom. Someone can even have the understanding, but they may not have the maturity. And maturity comes with Das. This is why children are only required to keep the mitzvahs when they turn 13. For a girl 12 and a boy 13. It has to do with maturity. It's not just the knowledge of the mitzvahs, because you have some young kids who know more mitzvahs at a young age and some older kids who know less mitzvahs at an older age. It's not just knowledge. It is mostly about maturity. And again, this is why 12 and 13. 12 and 13 is the age where we say children can now compute their brilliance or whatever they know to actual actions. So if anybody wants to know what is a bar and bat mitzvah really celebrating, it's actually celebrating maturity. Why at age 12 and 13 do we give a kid a special designation as bar and bat mitzvah? It has to do with maturity. It's nothing to do with the knowledge. Of course, we'd like them to be knowledgeable about what they have to do and what they don't have to do, but it's entirely a measure of maturity. That's how Judaism looks at it. That is why for girls it's 12 and for boys it's 13, because girls mature at a younger age. It's just how it is. Obviously, these are all generalities, but that's generally how it goes. So to give an example of the difference between understanding and what we're going to call today knowledge or maturity, however you want to look at it. But basically knowledge, Daas, right? So we had wisdom and understanding. We said wisdom and understanding don't necessarily equate to action because wisdom and understanding is in the brain, it's brilliance. Brilliance doesn't necessarily equate to action. That's why a child who's brilliant may do something stupid, right? We hope somebody who's older, they may not be as brilliant, but won't do something as stupid. It comes from the level of knowledge, Daas, knowledge, because knowledge is the bridge between our mind and our heart, between our mind and our actions. So there's an example in many Hasidic circles they use like this. They tell the story that there was in the shtetls, many people were illiterate. They didn't know how to read. So one day, a villager gets a very important letter, and looks very, very important. So he brings it right away to the town teacher, the rabbi of the town, or wherever he was, the town teacher, and he brings him and he asks him to read the letter. So the teacher, the rabbi of the town, reads the letter, and the villager faints. Why? Because in the letter it said that the villager's father had died. Now, what's going on here? Who understands the contents of the letter better? The guy who's actually reading it or the guy who's hearing it secondhand? The guy who's reading it has a better grasp of the concepts being written in the letter. But yet who's fainting is not the person who's understanding it better, but the person who's connecting with it more, the person who it means more to, the villager, because it's his father. The guy reading it, he understands it, but it doesn't affect him emotionally. He doesn't know the guy that passed away. This is what Daas is. Daas is knowledge. Knowledge means, as they say in it, you don't just hear, you dare. Not just you know it, but you really know it. No, it's not just you understand it, but you know it makes a difference in your life. Another great example is many today not as much, but going back, many doctors would smoke, despite their doctors, nurses, despite their great knowledge of how dangerous it was, they would smoke. Why? Because again, there's a difference between understanding and knowledge. Knowledge is the bridge that connects our understanding and our actions. In fact, there's a story with Aristotle. Aristotle was once caught doing something very low, for the low-class people. I think the story was he was eating something very low class. Maybe very yummy, maybe he was caught eating a cheeseburger or something. I don't know. Very low-class stuff. So they asked him, how is the great Aristotle, stooping down to such low things? So he said, listen, now I'm not Aristotle. Now I'm just a human being, There's what I know, my great wisdom and the understanding that knowledge is the most important thing in the human being. But then there's how I act, and they don't necessarily compute and go together. They don't necessarily go along. So all I'm trying to say is, in our mind, we spoke about there's the three powers of the mind. Wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. And without the third one, right, wisdom was the flash of inspiration. Understanding was delving deep into the understanding of the concept. But if you don't have knowledge which connects you with the concept will not become real in your life. And so it will remain stuck in your knowledge. How many people come to me and tell me, Rabbi, I really feel like I should be coming to synagogue more. I really feel like I should study more. Then they don't do it. Maybe they need a little bit more knowledge, right? They need to sit on it a little bit longer, let them connect with it, let them feel it. And as you can understand why this is now so important for Chabad. Remember what we've been explaining. Chabad is all about contemplating about God, thinking about God, getting excited about God, and then you'll serve God and do things that he loves. But you'll only get excited about God if you can bridge the gap between what you know and what you feel. And we see this, right? Sometimes you think about something and then suddenly you get excited about it. And sometimes you don't get excited about it. Sometimes the same thing that you hear, sometimes you're excited, sometimes you're not. It just depends how connected you are with the idea. The more connected you are, the longer it's going to last. Okay. So let's throw out a couple of words and let's see if you can identify, are they wisdom, knowledge, or understanding? Sorry, wisdom, understanding, or knowledge. Let's say maturity. I already gave that away to you, right? Maturity is knowledge, yeah. How about ideas? Wisdom, good ideas are wisdom. How about, let's say, questions and answers? FAQs, understanding, yeah. Flash of inspiration. Not inspiration, really. A light bulb, it goes off in the head, that depiction, light bulb would be wisdom, right? Yeah, so there's all different words. Use some Hebrew words here, but they don't really translate well. Oh, how about parables or examples? Would probably be understanding. Yeah, it would be understanding. Yep, so you're getting an idea now. You get an idea of how Chabad works. When you hear the word Chabad, now you know what it means. It's not all about the smarts, it's about bringing it into yourself. So let's take a look in the Tanya itself. I'm going to share on the screen. It's on page 62. Oh, so let me back up for a second before I read further. So we've explained that Daas is the key that connects between what you know and what you feel. How does it actually work? And the answer is by connecting to the concept. For example, there's a lot of discussion today about positive affirmations. It helps people, change their beliefs about themselves, helps them act differently. In order for a positive affirmation to really change the person, they have to really believe it. And therefore, they say that the person has to repeat it very often, right? You can't just tell yourself, once, I'm a good person, or I'm really good at this, or I'm really good at that. You have to constantly repeat it to yourself, because if you don't, you're not really going to connect with it. So one of the main factors of Daas, of knowledge, is consistency. You need to have consistency. In other words, let's take it now on serving God. If you're going to contemplate about God once a month for 5 minutes, then there's going to be a lack of consistency, and your Daas, your knowledge, is going to be very limited. The more you allow yourself to consistently bond with the idea, the more the idea is going to become part of you. And so he's going to bring an example from the Torah. In the Torah, there's a very interesting word that's used to describe intimacy. And the word that's used in the Jewish books is the word Daas, the word that we're discussing now, knowledge. Now, why would knowledge be used to describe intimacy? And the answer is because, as I just said a moment ago, because intimacy is about connection. And in order for us to allow an idea to truly bond with us, we need to have a strong connection. So let me share here on the screen. If it were to load, we're going to give it a moment. Okay, it's loaded. Okay, so let me share on the screen. It's page 62. Rotate left and share. All right, so it says like this. We're going to look at the chat in a moment. Or I should look at it now. Oh, I like the jokes. Okay. All right, that's good. All right, we've now explained the role of first two spheres, Chacham and Bina, wisdom and understanding. The fourth and fifth, Chesed and Gevura, kindness and severity, which give rise to love and reverence, and the sphere of 6 to 10, which are derivatives of 4 and 5. But the third sphere of Das, recognition, or as I call it, knowledge, still remains elusive. So he says like this. The term Das implies bonding and joining as Adam knew Eve, right? The Torah says, Adam yada et Chava. The Torah says, Adam knew Eve, and they bore children. So what does it mean? He knew her. The Torah writes everything in very clean language. That means he knew her. He was very much connected with her. Similarly, in our minds, Das means connection, suggesting that like physical bonding, Das is a process of focusing your mind with very firm and strong bond, an intense fixation of thought on the greatness of the blessed, infinite divine. So I want to read that. An intense fixation of thought. How often do we intensely fixate our thoughts on anything? But here's the key. If you're having trouble feeling the feelings towards God that you know to be true, maybe you're lacking in the intense fixation on thought. And then he continues, without losing concentration. Daas does not add any new information, which was not fathomed by wisdom and understanding. Rather, it fosters an attachment to the existing idea to render it real and relevant. And as he continues, because even if you appreciate the greatness of the blessed infinite light with your chachma bina, with your wisdom and understanding, unless you bond your das, your knowledge, focusing your mind with, the next page, with intensity and consistency, you will not produce genuine love and reverence in your mind. Word genuine is important. Says amitas, true. In other words, genuine meaning some form of lasting, but as he continues, but only worthless delusions of love and reverence that you will not be able to sustain, because only Das makes the concept of God personally relevant to you. In other words, you can get excited for momentarily about God, but if you want genuine means some form of lasting power that can change, right? Genuine means something that just doesn't blow away with the first wind, right? Think of the, you want a real love. What do they call it? Made in China, a product that's so flimsy, you bought $1 for Alibaba or whatever it is. You want a real love, you gotta connect with the concept. And again, this is all what I'm saying. We may experience love of God, but they may be, as he says, delusional. Why does he call them worthless delusions of love? Because they're not worthless in that. Obviously, it's great to feel feelings of love towards God, but they're worthless in that they won't move the ball in your actions. Because if they're so weak, they'll cave at the first sign of resistance, aka your evil inclination or your animal soul. So they're not really helpful to you. So yeah, you might feel love for God for a moment, but they're not helpful. And we're all in the Tanya, we're all about feelings of love that are going to help you. That's the whole point of the Tanya. You want to create feelings of love towards God that will move the ball in your actions. And so, right, because we're not into spiritual, we are into spirituality, but we're into spirituality that trickles down into action. That's the important part. So it continues like this. Therefore, Das, which is the bond, the connection, the knowledge, ensures the stability of the emotions and their energy. Since all emotions ultimately depend on Das, it incorporates chesed and gevura. In other words, if you recall the, let me find the Sephiros view. Let's see if we can find the Sephiros image. If you recall, right, we had kindness, severity, and then there's a middle. Let's take a look over here. I found one from Wikipedia. What do you know? Let's see. Visit. It's from Wikipedia. Are you seeing my screen over here, Wikipedia? You see my screen on Wikipedia?
Yes, we see.
Yes, okay, good. So here is a typical view of the spheres. You've seen it before, right? You know what I'm talking about. So you have on the we're not gonna talk about Keter for now, but you have on the right, this is Chochmah, wisdom. You have on the left understanding. Last time we explained how they both go into two columns of kindness, severity, or love and fear. And then Das is in the middle, because Das is, if you want to call it neutral, or it gives birth to both sides. It gives birth both to the kindness and severity. Both love and awe rely on Das. So Das is a middle of the line, Sephira, or power of our soul. Okay, so let me get back here. This is like this. That's why he said, since all emotions ultimately depend on Das, it incorporates chesed and gevura, meaning it'll be in the middle, i.e. love and its derivatives, reverence and its derivatives. We will discuss the practical application of Das from chapter 9, page 115 to 16, chapter 16, page 190, and at length in chapter 42. This is just all to remind you that this part of the Tanya is not technically going into the practical applications of any of what we're discussing. This part of the Tanya is really giving you the background of your soul, how your soul works, your animal soul, your godly soul. The practical is the later parts of the Tanya. Along the way, there might be some practical ideas, because whenever you want to describe how it works, you need to give some example. But ultimately, my point is that this part of the Tanya is more about giving us our inner workings, not so much about the practical lessons. That being said, let's read the practical lesson that he puts here in the practical Tanya. So he writes like here: the crucial step what generates feelings that are real and sustainable is Daas, knowledge. I use my Daas by personalizing an idea, sensing how it is relevant to me and my life experience. Right? Becomes yours. And this will dovetail on a story that I want to tell. So there was once the Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Chabad Rebbe, came into his father, the Rebbe Maharash, for a private audience. And he said, how would he be able to, he wanted to reach a certain rung in his divine service of God. How do I get there? And his father answered him and he said, if it's nogea, if the concept is personally relevant to you, then you will understand it. And he brings a proof. He says, the Talmud sometimes dissects the possible ideas of what people might be thinking, right? In other words, there's an argument between, let's say, A and B, right? And so the Talmud will discuss, let's say, A claims this, B claims that, B claims that. Then the Talmud goes into lengthy discussions of what they could mean. And then the commentaries on the Talmud go into deeper discussions of what they mean. And so the question is, do we really think these simple people are so brilliant? The depths of the Talmud are so deep. Do we really think these two people coming with their claims were thinking all these deep ideas, these deep twisted ideas? We think they might be thinking that the Talmud is saying, well, what if he really means this, or really means that, or really means this, really means that? And the answer is yes. Why? Because when something is relevant to you, then suddenly you come up with a lot of good ideas. You ever anybody ever dealt with employee, employer, or maybe your kids? You ask them to find something or to do something for you. And along the way, they have all types of questions. Oh, I don't know how to do it. I couldn't find this. I couldn't find that. Where is it? Where is that? Can you help me? Can you do this for me? It's so interesting that when it's something that they really want, suddenly they figure it all out, right? If it's an employee, if they have buy-in, they'll figure it out, right? They don't need you as much. Or if it's your child, if it's figuring out a video game, or if it's figuring out how to get the candy, or figuring out, suddenly people become more resourceful when it feels relevant and personal to them. Suddenly, it's amazing, right? Kids are suddenly more resourceful. When you ask them to clean up the floor and you come an hour later, like, oh, well, I couldn't find the bucket to put away the toys. But if after cleaning up the toys, they were going to get, some big treat, suddenly they had no trouble finding what they need, right? That's how it is. When something is personally relevant, we operate at a totally different level. And his point was that if we consider love of God personally relevant, if we consider it something that we consider relevant, then we will find the power and the wherewithal to go through all these steps of chokhmah, wisdom, understanding, and finally knowledge. And knowledge is the most dependent upon finding something that is personally relevant. So this ends chapter 3. And I want to give a recap so we can move on to the next step. Thank you so much. Yes, that's correct. So today, with this chapter, we understood the 10 powers of the soul, which mirror God's 10 powers through which He operates this world. And we said generally there are two sides. There's the kindness or the love, and the severity and the awe. And we also said, and then there's of course a middle. We also said how there's 3 intellectual, 7 emotional, and ultimately we end off that how do we bridge the gap between the intellectual and the emotional is through Daas, through spending time deeply contemplating a concept and making sure it feels relevant to us and to our lives. And sometimes, just to tell you, sometimes the Alter Rebbe would say if people are having trouble connecting to a concept, sometimes singing a Hasidic nigun can help. Singing a Hasidic song, the depth of the song and how it talks to us all can sometimes help us open up our minds. So just another tool so you should know about, because one time the Hasidim came to the Alter Rabbi, they told him, we're not understanding the Tanya. And he says, well, you need to be using a Hasidic song as well. These are all things that help out and allow us to tap into these deep and important concepts. Okay, any questions or comments? Before we move on to the next chapter, in which we will discuss if we spoke about the powers of the soul, next chapter we're going to discuss the clothing of the soul. And I'll give you a hint, it's not from Banana Republic. Okay. So nobody? Nope. No, nothing. Okay, all right. Well, then we're ready. We're ready for the next chapter. So this is going to be chapter 4. Let's see. Let me make sure I'm on the right place over here. Okay. What is the first thing a child does when a child is born?
Cry.
Right? Why do children cry? Why doesn't he just keep, if he's not so happy, why doesn't he just keep it inside?
Fear.
Huh?
Fear.
But we all have a strong desire to express our feelings, right? In other words, in theory, we've been discussing the soul, the 10 powers of the soul, our thoughts and our feelings. We as human beings have a strong feeling of a need for expressing our feelings. It's interesting, right? I mean, think about it. Why not, like, okay, so you're feeling that way, just keep it to yourself, right? But that doesn't really work. Most of us have a strong desire to express our feelings. And so we today are going to discuss the expressions of the soul. And that is where we're going to go into. We're going to go into expressions of the soul. Not the soul itself, but expressions of the soul. We're going to start first with the two most obvious forms of expression of the soul. What are the two most obvious forms of expression of ourselves or our soul?
Happiness and anger.
Okay. Okay. So I don't mean a specific expression. I mean more general. There are two general things we do to express how we feel.
We speak.
Speak, yes.
I don't know.
Speech, good. Speech is one. What?
Laugh.
We laugh. Laugh would go within speaking. It's all. So there's speech and there's action. Both of them are ways of expressing how we feel. Pretty much all external expressions of our feelings can be described with these two things: speech and action. Can your inner feelings, can your expressions be different than how you're actually feeling? Right, so we said you might feel happy, you might laugh, you might feel sad, you might cry. You might break things if you feel sad or angry. But can you also express yourself differently than how you feel? Or talk differently than how you feel? Is that possible? Yes, you can, right? You can feel very sad and put on a happy face. Some people are better at it than others. You can feel sad and do happy things. So all this goes to show that our expressions are not actually fully a part of us. That's why we're calling them expressions. They're not intrinsic to our soul. We're trying to differentiate here between our soul powers and our expressions. And our expressions, or as we're going to call garments, are not entirely us. But let's try Right. So you can act differently than how you feel. You can speak differently than how you feel. All this goes to show that speech, action is not exactly us. What about thought? We understand that speech and action is definitely not fully a part of us, right? How about thought? Is thought any different? Any thoughts? No?
Well, we think of thought as being more internal, and the one's being more external, although
yeah, thought is typically we think is more internal, right? Thought, in other words, you can think. Yes, Nina.
Oh, you noticed I am muted. That's cool. Yeah, I just like. Are you asking if we control our thoughts? Is that?
Well, what I'm trying to say is, I am not my actions. I am not my speech. Now the question is, am I my thoughts?
No, you're not, is the answer.
Okay. Okay, good.
It's only a part of you. And modern day psychology embraces an idea that we are, and you know a little bit about this, internal family systems, that we are a sum of many different parts. So we have very, very
right. Oh,
diverse.
Okay. I get where you're going. I guess my question would be, well, then the question is thought a part of you? Is it even a part of you?
Yes.
Are your thoughts a part of you?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So let's break this apart. So, our actions and our speech is a way of expressing ourselves to others. Our thoughts is a way of expressing ourselves to ourselves. In other words, if you feel sad, but you can't put it to words, you may not, or even words in your mind, you may not fully understand what you're feeling, right?
Yep, exactly.
Right? So thoughts can help you clarify both intellectually what you're thinking. Thoughts can also help you clarify what you're feeling. Nevertheless, we consider thought not to be entirely a part of you. We also consider it in Judaism to be a garment, and I'll explain why. So we give a couple examples. First of all, the feelings come before the thoughts. The thoughts are only explaining the feeling. They help understand, they help explain the feeling. The feelings exist without the thought. Number two, you can think something differently than what you're feeling. You can't feel differently than what you're feeling. I mean, if you feel something, you can tell yourself to feel differently. But either will or won't work. But you can 100% think differently than how you're feeling. If you so choose, you can. You know, if you have a strong mind, you can think about different thoughts. Hopefully, eventually, they'll redirect your feelings somewhere else. But if you're feeling one way, you can't force yourself to feel another way. You thought feelings come out of thinking. Feelings can be born out of thinking. That's correct. But feelings are more like a tool. Well, think about it like this. Feelings can come out of thinking. They also, let's say, can come out of action. So let's say you're trying to fix something and now you break it. So your actions have broken it. Then your thoughts think about it and then you feel a certain way. It is weird. It's weird that something that's less intrinsic to us can affect our feelings, but that's really how everything works. We respond to things that are around us. They're external to us, and they may cause our feelings to change. My point is that your feelings are more intrinsic of who you are than your thoughts. Your thoughts are less of you. that's how you can use your thoughts to redirect your feelings. In other words, your feelings are almost a tool for you.
They come from different places in the body, and they also come from different sephirot.
They are different sephirot, yes, but you mean they come from different places in your body?
Emotions come from the heart.
Yeah, someone said, didn't we say earlier, we can't have feelings without thinking thoughts? Again, it's true. You can't have feelings without thinking thoughts, but the thoughts, you can change the thoughts before you change the feelings. Thoughts you can change on demand, is what I'm trying to say. I mean, of course, you tell somebody, don't think about the purple elephant, but technically thoughts you can change on demand, feelings you can't. You could try through your thoughts to change your feelings. Doesn't always work right away. It might take a lot of time, as we've described it. It could take a lot of time. All this is to show that, right? We always say people are hard to change, right? All this is to show that thoughts are less intrinsic of who you are, proven by the fact that you can easily change a thought, or for the most part, you can change a thought. What I mentioned earlier, positive affirmations is a good example. You can totally think things in your mind that you totally don't believe. So you're thinking it, even though you know that you don't believe it. Right? You're thinking, I am good, I am smart, I am wise, I am this, I am that. Thoughts have a big effect on who you are, who your intrinsic self is, but it's not your intrinsic self. We call these garments, thought, speech, and action, we call garments. Is somebody who is dancing, are they happy? Is somebody who is thinking happy thoughts happy? No. Somebody who's happy is somebody who feels happy. You have people who are thinking happy thoughts. You have people who are acting happily, but actually happy is not that. Actually happy is somebody who's actually happy. This is showing you that thought, speech, and action are not necessarily who you are. They can affect yourself. They can affect your soul, how your soul is feeling, but they are not you yourself. To give an example, you can think all day 1 + 1 is 3. You can think it. It's not true. Won't change how you feel about it. You can think it. Thoughts are a tool. Action is not who you are. That's correct. Action is not who you are. You are your soul with its 10 powers. And you can express yourself with actions. Your actions are not who you are. Your actions are not who you are. They might be indicative of the type of person that you are, but they're not who you are, right? Prove it by the fact that a bad person, someone who committed murder is not a murderer, is probably what we mean to say. Someone who committed murder is not a murderer. All right, so those are words we use. We call him a murderer. Yes, he murdered somebody, so we call him a murderer. But does that mean he murders everybody? Is that like his thing? Maybe not. Maybe he just murdered one person. I don't know. That doesn't make him who he is. He's in Judaism, he's done a sin, he's got to pay for it. We'll call him a murderer. Let's give an example. You can have a really nasty person that will give charity. Does that mean now he's a good person? I guess if you want to go to the parts there, he has a good part of him, which we can discuss when we get to this is complicated because once we get to the two souls, and there's parts. But my point is that your thoughts, your actions, and your speech are expressions of yourself. Maybe the murderer, murderer is a good example. You have somebody who unfortunately is, let's say, schizophrenic, has 2 personalities. So they murdered one day when they were feeling their murderous self. Then the next day they were feeling something differently. And they're totally not in a place of murdering. Or let's give another example. Somebody murdered and they totally changed their life. Now they won't murder anybody else. Would you still call them a murderer? I mean, technically you call them a murderer. I'm not going to explain how they evaded the death penalty, but they're not a murderous type of person anymore. Maybe they've changed. This is just showing you that what your thoughts your speech, and your action is not necessarily you, because you can do any of those three things without changing. They might change you, they probably will, but they don't necessarily have to. They are not indicative. They are not necessarily indicative of you. You can do any of those three things without it being reflective of who you are. I mean, hopefully they are reflective of who you are, but they don't have to be, right? You can point a gun at someone's head and force them to do an action. You can even force them to say something. And if we were to get into brain scans, you can force them to think something. But I don't think you can force them to feel something. Can't force it. So you're writing here, you want to know, is that not like not taking responsibility for our actions? No. We don't, on this world, there's a saying in Jewish law, a judge can only judge by what he sees, right? Today there's a discussion. We have to look at everybody's socioeconomics and how they grew up and what type of household they grew up and how that affected them and why they're doing what they do. And that's all great for the psychologist. But in the court of law, we judge based on actions. God can deal with all that. God is a true judge that knows how to factor in the person and their personality and where they grew up. But God tells us we cannot judge based on what's going on inside. If someone does an action, you have to pay for it. I mean, there's no connection. Just because I am not evil, if I did something wrong, I have to pay for it, right? If I even mistakenly broke somebody's thing, I have to pay for it. That's the law, typically, with the exception of certain cases. But generally in Jewish law, if I do something mistakenly, I have to pay for it. Who cares? I didn't do it on purpose, right? If you make a mistake and you cause problems, you have to pay for it. You still have to you still take responsibility for your actions. It doesn't necessarily reflect who you are. It doesn't have to. It's two different things. Two different things. All this is to say that your thought, your speech, and your action are not who you are. Why is this important? Like, why am I twisting your minds in pretzels? Well, I guess we'll find out as time goes on. But we have to set the stage because we're describing your soul. Your soul is made up of 10 powers. Then someone's writing how you define this out. I'll get to that in a moment. Your soul is made up of 10 powers. Then you have 3 ways of expressing your soul: thought, speech, and action. There are 3 ways of expression. But these expressions are not necessarily inherently a part of you. We call them garments. Just like physical garments, on the one hand, the garments completely envelop you and they present you to the world, but nevertheless, they are not entirely who you are, and they don't even have to be indicative of how you feel about yourself. And you can take them off. You can take them off whenever you want. You can switch them, switch your clothing. Even thoughts are like clothing. You can switch. In other words, we can never stop thinking, but we can switch our thoughts. You're asking, what defines a tzaddik? A tzaddik is actually defined in the Tanya by both his actions and his inner core. A tzaddik in Chabad is defined by not just his actions, but by also if he's gotten rid of his evil inclinations. So he's defined by his inner core, not just by his garments. But that's for a later chapter. But if you recall in the beginning of the Tanya, we had a discussion, what is a tzaddik? Hopefully everybody is thoroughly confused. I'll tell a story actually. The story is that there was a good comedian, really good comedian. He was the best comedian in the world. And people would come to him all the time for a joke, for a laugh. And he would help uplift people's spirits. And so there was a psychologist in town who used to refer some of his patients to this comedian. And one day a patient walks into his office, completely depressed, totally broken, nothing happy about him. And the psychologist says, you know what, I think for you, the best remedy would be that you should go to the comedian. This good comedian, he'll help cheer you up, he'll change you. So this patient says, I'm sorry, but I can't go. The psychologist says, why not? He says, because I am the comedian. I am the comedian. In other words, you can be the greatest comedian. You can make everybody else laugh. You can show you laugh. You come with the best jokes, but you can be depressed inside. It's two separate things. He was able to use his thoughts, his speech, his action as a comedian, but inside he felt deep in the pits. Let's take a look inside the Tanya. I know this is all confusing, but it's all going to become important. I'll tell you why. Because ultimately the Tanya is going to get to like this. The Tanya is going to get to like this. Your level of intellect, how much you can understand and how much you can feel. We will do our best, but it's not always in our control. But what is always in our control is our thoughts, our speech, and our action. That's really what the Tanya is going to get to. Your inner core, your inner self, you can try to change, do the best you can. But ultimately, the only thing that we are completely in charge of is how we think, how we speak, and how we act. But that's just to confuse you. So let's break this down, because it's going to be a while to unpack what we're discussing over here. I'm on the wrong page over here. Let me go to over here. We're just going to read the beginning of this chapter. All right, section 1, the clothes of your soul. So it says like this. Are your thoughts really you, or are they just the chatter of your mind detached from your true self, which runs much deeper? To provide a nuanced answer to this question, Tanya will describe your thoughts as clothing of the soul. The clothes you wear express your personality, and yet at the same time, they're not actually you. On different days, you wear different outfits, all of which tell us something about you, but none of which fully encapsulates the enigma which lies within you. These are tools of expression which give us the glimpse into who you are without ever revealing the whole picture. So again, they're a glimpse into who you are, not the whole picture. That is how you should relate to your thoughts. They are what your soul is wearing at any given moment. Right? You ever heard somebody say your thoughts are not you? It's exactly what they're saying. Your soul never bears herself. It always expresses and hides itself through a garment of thought. Right? Garments are both partially revealing and partially not. They partially give an expression of who you are, but they're not full you. Up to this point, you probably looked at your thoughts as your inner world and your spoken words and action as your outer world. The Tanya will teach you here that. Gotta turn the page. We'll teach you here that. You gotta rotate the page. Even as your thoughts are really your outer self, a mere set of tools that can be steered by your soul in any directions. And so now we're going to read inside. Furthermore, every divine soul possesses 3 garments. As the Tanya has previously explained, you possess 2 souls, an animal soul, which is self-oriented, and a divine soul, which desires to follow God. God's will was revealed to mankind at Sinai through 613 commandments of the Torah. So it follows that the garments of the divine soul, which they are, I'll get to the comments in a moment, are every thought, spoken word, or deed devoted to the 613 commandments of the Torah. The most fully awakened state of the conscious mind is when all your garments are devoted to God and not to yourself. That's the most fully awakened conscious mind. Since when you practically observe all the action-related mitzvos and use your speech to discuss the 613 mitzvos or the laws, and you immerse your thought in whatever you can grasp from Torah texts, which are analyzed through 4 different methods: pshat, literal, remez, allegorical, Jewish homiletical, sod, mystical. Then your whole divine soul, including all 636 components, is dressed through her garments of action, speech, and thought in the 613 commandments of Torah. In other words, you can enclose, your soul can be enclosed in thoughts of Judaism, speech of Judaism, actions of Judaism. That is the complete state you want to be in. Your soul and mitzvos are deeply compatible, corresponding precisely to the 613 components of your soul, which become fully engaged through observing the mitzvahs. That was discussion we had in class and shops. My point is, the point of this chapter so far is to tell you that the way that thought, speech, and action are the expressions of your soul, and you want to express your soul in good thoughts, good speech, and good action. And thought, speech, and action is not necessarily the your soul itself. It is the expression of your soul. So in other words, as we're going to get to in the Tanya, you work on yourself to help inspire you to have the proper expressions of your soul. And ironically, it's only through the expression that you can do good deeds. In other words, I see Esmeralda's asking, your thoughts is not you because you haven't acted. Once you acted on it, why is that not you? It's not you, it's what you've done, right? That's why we say it's what you've done. It's not you. You've done it. You'll be credited for it 100%, but it's not you. You and the action are two separate things. Only God and his action are the same. If I build something, that action, I did it. It's not me. It's what I've done. Me, what am I? It's the existential question, right? What am I? The Tanya's answer, what are you? You are a soul with the 10 powers. The Chochmah Bina Dat, knowledge, wisdom, understanding, which, by the way, gets expressed through thought, and your 7 feelings, your 7 emotions. That's you. And your soul expresses itself through the garments. And the goal is, in life, as he's going to say, to always have good expressions of your soul. Your animal soul is going to want to express itself in knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, and thoughts, bad thoughts. Your good soul is going to want to express itself in knowledge, wisdom, understanding, and good thoughts, which leads to good actions, leads to good feelings, good actions, and all that good stuff. But ultimately, what do they say? The road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? Which again, just goes to show you that what you can be and what you can do can be 2 totally different things. And this is actually, I think, a positive idea. I don't have to be here to do the right thing. I don't have to be the best person in order to do the right thing. I can do good things even when I'm not there, right? I meet people all the time and they tell me, Rabbi, I'm a bad Jew. So I say, what? So what? You're a bad Jew. You can still do a mitzvah right now. You don't need to be here. You don't need to be Moses. Do good things. You don't need to be a rabbi. You can be you. Be who you are. You could feel however you want to feel. You could put on different clothing every day. And talk of the soul, the clothing is your thought, speech, and action. You can choose today to think, speak, and act in the right way. Now, you might say, well, yes, I can technically choose the right thoughts, the right speech, and action despite how I feel, but that's really hard, to force myself to do things that I'm not feeling. And the answer is, you're right, it is hard. And so the Tanya will give us tips and ideas of how to inspire ourselves to change our feelings, which ultimately will help us act the right way. But the point is, even when you're not feeling it, you can choose to act the right way.
Rabbi,
Yes.
could I ask you a question?
Yes.
So
Recording. Yes.
is it safe to